up, everybody? Axwizard here, back with another devlog for my game Neurality 3092. It's been quite a while since my last devlog. What I've done since last episode, let me just show you before I get into this, for the people who don't want to watch all the code stuff. So, first things first, the UI looks a little bit different, so it's a bit more sparse. So what I did is instead of trying to like finagle this half-ass styling I was doing earlier, I'm just reverting everything back to using basic nodes, and then I'm going to delve into doing themes and then do styling through themes, because themes are very powerful. I haven't quite grasped them in Godot yet, so when I get ready to tackle that, themes are going to be very powerful. But let's I did not want to exit. I'm a derp. So what I did is, when you land at a location, the UI simplified. I don't have that corny picture anymore. I don't think I'm going to end up drawing a bunch of those, because it's not good art anyway. So I simplified it. It's very basic. Again, once I use themes, all this stuff is going to be a lot more stylized. So trade goods window, this is basically the same. You might notice I increased the price of things, and also I increased the amount of starting funds you have. So doing that, I'm going to get rid of these icons I drew too, because again, they're terrible. I'm probably going to end up redoing this entire UI, because I cobbled this bad boy together and it is atrocious. But what I did do, the big feature I added is, or I'm working on, is the shipyard. Now I've only got it, if I'm being completely honest, I've only got it like 40% done. Because currently right now I only have the browse function working. I don't have the customize functioning yet. So browse, if we go to browse, you can see you can browse some ships, and you'll see that some ships are blocked off, like it requires synthocracy authorization to purchase. Those are like faction ships, so you have to belong to that faction. So I've got a rudimentary system in place for that, and then when you click on a ship, it'll give you some details about the ship. Now I've got lots of cool plans for this screen. The basic stuff I have going on here, like this is just extremely basic. I also have a scroll bar here, so if you were to try to click on this synthocracy flagship, it's got like 15 weapons. It would just basically fill up this whole thing, and you can scroll down and see it. So the way I've built this makes a lot more sense to me, and I've basically broke it down into components. So if we go view the shipyard screen, there is the shipyard window, and it renders this choose window. When you click browse, it renders a browse window, and then when you click a item, or a item in this grid, so you click a ship, it will bring you to the ship info window. And I don't have purchase working yet, because there's a few things I want to do, and as well with the formatting here, I'm using BB code in a rich text label, which is the first time I've tried doing that, so that's been interesting. And the reason why I did it is because I want to be able to just style like one string, so I can build this string as I go. I don't want to have to reference a bunch of different labels and then update those labels' data. I just want to build one big string, have it all formatted the way I want, and then that way I can just update it that way. I think that's much cleaner. It's much more intuitive as well, looking through the code, so you can try to see what I'm doing. And what I want to be able to do is, when you're looking to purchase a new ship, what I'm working on right now is, in parentheses, it'll show like the change compared to your current ship. So for example, with my little synthocracy shuttle, my acceleration speed is like 2.4. But if we look at this big heavy freighter, the acceleration speed is 0.6. So that is a lot less than my current acceleration. So I would show that in red, and then I would show the difference in parentheses in red to show that it's less than what you currently have now. However, you might find some things like the hull integrity, the shield capacity, and the cargo hold capacity, and the number of weapon slots. Those are all greater, so those would be in green, and they'll have a plus sign rather than a minus sign. So I'm working on getting that. The thing that I'm stuck on is trying to figure out how to persist player data. And I think what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to stop work on this and work on an effective save system. So that's why I'm making this devlog now, even though this feature isn't finished. Because if I just try to do it all at once, it's going to be a massive devlog and no one's going to watch that. So this is what I've got so far. This is my plan. I've gone through like 5 or 6 different layouts for this. Originally, I was just trying to do like a list on the left, and then, you know, have all the details about that ship when you click on it on the right, and then, you know, show all the details compared to your current ship, and it's not great. I think for the browse window, when you go to look at a ship, I think what I'm going to do is I'm already instancing the ship to get all this data. So what I might do is I might just put a separate viewport here and then instance the ship and then just have it traveling through space, and then just add like my parallax background and stuff like that. So you get a preview of like what the ship looks like with all its thrusters and stuff. And you'll actually be able to even see where all the weapons and stuff are too. Because right now that doesn't work. And then I'm still brainstorming how I want to handle the customized screen, because that's going to be interesting. So that's the big change I've got currently. The UI stuff, I've just been delving into that in my spare time, and I've only been working on it like in small chunks, like maybe like an hour or 2 at a time. And most of that work time is sort of just getting caught up like where I was, trying to figure out what my thought process was. So I end up just kind of retreading the same ground a lot, but that's just the way it works. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it's coming along, as far as like just a look, feel, like I'm immersed when I play it, and there's not even that much gameplay in it yet. So, you know, right now the gameplay loop consists of going and buying a bunch of stuff and then selling it. That's really all you can really do. But even that seems to work pretty well, and I like, it's kind of fun. And then once I get this ship working, this shipyard working, you'll be able to do the gameplay loop of buying a new ship, and then you can maximize profits even more. So that's going to be really fun. But I haven't stopped work on it. It's just I've sort of paused work on it for a bit. I'm starting to get back into it, but you know, it's taking time. So I think the next fish I'm going to have to fry is I'm going to have to figure out a save system. Because what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to save the player data. And also I'll make it that way so you can like load saves and stuff like that. So I'll knock out 2 birds with 1 stone, having a save system. And that'll be really cool, because then I can access all that data from the shipyard screen. So I'll just pull that save file like in the background, and I'll be able to access all the player ship data, so you can get an accurate comparison of what you're doing. Now on top of that, I think what I kind of want to do is I want to enter, how do I say this? I want to make like a ship condition modifier, right? So say for example you're going to the shipyard and you're looking at ships. There might be some that are like brand new. There might be some that are used and cheaper. That could be a really interesting system, because then, you know, if you're just starting out like a little merchant ship, maybe you want to buy one of those merchant vessels, but you don't want to pay top dollar for a new one. Maybe you just want something that's just got some more cargo hold, so you can make, you know, more profitable runs to get more money early on. I found myself doing that in Escape Velocity Nova a lot. So, you know, say for example, this little Coalition small freighter, this bad boy runs you 250 million credits. And maybe you want like a used one that has lower acceleration, lower max speed, maybe slightly lower rotation speed, less boost duration, maybe you know, degraded hull integrity and shield capacity, but still has the same amount of cargo space. that could be cool. That might be something that you're interested in to get you started. So I think entering in like ship conditions, like whether it's like, you know, bad, like I guess what would the conditions for a ship be? Salvage, like the thing barely runs, bad, good, new. I don't know. I'm not just brainstorming on it, but that's what I'm thinking. But the next big thing I'm going to tackle is the save system. So let's jump into the code review portion. So what have I done since last episode? So the last devlog I did is I tried to port the game to Godot 4. And there were lots of cool features that I wanted to leverage in Godot 4. And realistically, the port didn't take too long to get to a working state. There were some few annoying things I had to do, but what ultimately led me to revert back to just using 3.4, which is what I've been using. I could upgrade to 3.6 to add access to new features, but so far I'm fine in 3.4. I don't want to go through all the effort. So the big thing that I couldn't get working in Godot 4 was the glow. So this fancy glow to make this like sun look like a ball of gas, like a star, like that looks awesome, right? And then also how it affects the light trails and stuff like that. So all that stuff was really cool. And the big thing that makes this happen is the glow. Well, they changed rendering in Godot 4, added a lot of new features, but one of the things that wasn't handled was glow. So when I went to Godot 4, glow wasn't a thing. Like it did not look good, and no matter what I did, it wouldn't look this cool. And this just adds so much to the game that I didn't realize how much it actually helps until it was gone. So the game felt a lot less immersive, a lot more dead, a lot more lame without this big ball of gas. And so I reverted it, and I'm just gonna finish this game in Godot 3.4. There were lots of cool UI features I wanted to use in Godot 4 because they changed UI quite a bit, and I was excited about that. Lots of their changes, but I couldn't make it work, and that was a deal breaker for me. So I reverted. Thankfully, since I put this game in version control, I was able to just simply switch back to my main branch, load this back up in Godot 3.4, and I was pretty much back to where I was. So I didn't have to make any major changes, but the problem was I didn't have my star system mapper tool in version control. So when I started a branch on this to bring it up to Godot 4, well, I'm importing a file from Star System Mapper Tool, and you can't, and I'm basically just dumping a dictionary into a file. Well, you can't load a Godot 3 dictionary into Godot 4. So what I thought was like, I'll just update Star System Mapper Tool to Godot 4 as well. And that was pretty easy. I only had to fix like a few things, a few minor things, and it was good to go. Now, the problem is, I didn't have it in version control. So since I reverted this, I didn't have a way to easily revert Star System Mapper Tool because I'm an idiot. So what I did was I kept Star System Mapper Tool using Godot 4. So what I had to do was I was already exporting stuff to JSON on the Star System Mapper Tool. So I just made this load it in as JSON. So the very first change I had to make to get back up and running is if we go to, let's see, where is it? I think it's in my auto loads. If we go to starsystems.gd, this is where we're loading the file to populate our map dictionary, our star system map. So what I'm doing is I'm just opening, I'm just doing parse JSON, get file as text, and then I made a utility function to convert a string to vector 2 because it stores the when you parse it as JSON, it just it doesn't handle vector 2s like in a native format. It just makes it a string. So I made this utility function that just parses out, that splits it, and then sets the value. And if it has any problems, it just returns an empty vector 2. So that was the first change I made. And this is fairly simple. Again, it's working with a string. So I don't know why I copied it again, but whatever. So I copied it. I'm erasing. What am I doing? Oh, right. So this is the format that it gives us right here. Like, so parentheses, a number value separated by a comma, another number value, ending parentheses. So I'm cutting out the parentheses. So I'm erasing the very first position. I'm erasing one character from the 0 index starting position of the string. So I'm getting rid of this parentheses. Then I'm trimming the end of it. So I'm trimming 1 off of the end of the length. And since this is a 0 index, it's basically a byte slice or a byte array. So it's 0 index just like an array. So I'm doing the length -1, and I'm just trimming 1 off of the end of that. So that gets rid of both of these parentheses. So now I'm just left with these numbers. Now what I'm doing is I'm splitting that by that comma. Looks like I got a space here. I wonder if that's intentional. It's working, so I assume it is. So I'm splitting it out by the comma. So now I have X and Y values returned. So I'm just returning that vector 2 array 0 array 1, and it seems to work. So that's how I got that working. So cool. Talked about those changes. Let me get rid of those off this list. So next thing I did is I redid some UI windows in preparation for theme design. So one thing I noticed right away, especially when I ported to Godot 4, is that the crappy rigged up UI that I had did not work. So I started redesigning things, mostly just reverting everything back to like non-stylized components and just relying on base components. So location window, I standardized that with just basic control nodes. I didn't try to do anything fancy or like make my own special buttons or anything. I just reverted all these back to what they were. Cut this out. All right, so I did those, and I mean, if you want to see what I did to those, I guess I can pull up one of them. Let's see, UI. So you can see here, like I used to have like some special buttons on the side here. I just reverted those to standard buttons. Like I had this hand-drawn button scene, which I think I can actually get rid of now. Let me see if it'll let me. There we go. So. Don't save. There you go. So I got rid of that. That is no longer a thing. Let me make sure that the game still runs. Yep, still runs. Cool. So I just streamlined it, added some like some vertical separators here. Again, I'm just using basic control nodes, and yeah, I did that. So nothing really too major there. That was just a small tweak I made, and honestly, the game looks a lot better just even with the stock UI, so I'm not too mad about it. All right, so get rid of that. The next thing I did was initial implementation of managing player state. This is going to be all thrown out, so I'm probably not even going to talk about this because this is just a band-aid solution that I made that's not even going to work. So I'm not even going to talk about that because it's not doing what I want to do anyway. The big thing I did is I refactored ships. So I've been thinking about that one comment where my ships were just really hectic and cluttered. And I tended to agree. So I went and I did something about it. So if we bring up one of my ships here, you can see on the left here, it looks a lot less cluttered. So what I did is I made this ship thrusters type. I made a class for it. And I put all these ship thrusters in there. And so the ship thrusters class manages all the ship thrusters. Ship weapons handles all the weapon slots. So I've got them grouped there. Ship shields just manages the shield. It's nothing special. I just made it its own class since there were some fancy things I needed to do for the shield. And also when I start adding more and more like different types of ships, especially from the more alien factions, the shield might need to be handled differently. So this will let me do that. And then I just finally grouped all the occluders under another node 2D just to group them up and just sort of allow me to collapse them rather than just having everything, you know, like this is a pretty small ship. And if you look at all the stuff we already have here, like this was pretty outrageous, like as far as clutter. So I grouped them all up nicely. And I also made code changes to accommodate that. So if we go down here now, I'm only at like 1,200 lines of code now. It used to be up to like 1,700. So I cut out like 500 lines of code, just moving stuff to those other classes. So let's talk about the changes I did here. So there's quite a few changes I made. Basically, I cut everything out that was relative to those portions. So for the shields, the thrusters, weapons, all that stuff, I moved that code to those specific things. And then when I need to use those, I am just making sure I have those. Where is it? Here we go. So now I have these on-ready variables for my thrusters, weapons, and shields. And then I can call their methods when I need to do something with those things. So I feel a lot better about that. There's still room for improvement. Like I need to clean up a lot of these variables and stuff here. A lot of this stuff is pretty bad. I also made the actions a dictionary rather than just having like a bunch of different separate variables. And I forgot why exactly. Oh, I did that because when I was porting some of the functionality to the other classes, they didn't have any insight on the player input. So if I just make everything a dictionary to just one thing, I can pass in one argument, one parameter, rather than, you know, 9 or however many there are here. Yeah, there's like 9. So easy fix. Easy solution. So that's why I did that. So let's take a look at some of these new classes. So if we go over here to my classes, we can see we have a ship shields class. So you can see we just have all the variables that we had previously. I might have renamed them a little bit, cleaned them up while I was there. Brought in all this stuff, added a shield sound player and stuff like that. So now we have this... We have a lot of stuff that we're doing automatically, but now we have like some exported functions. I say exported, which means that the functions are accessible outside of it. So I really started hammering home on the public versus private functions. So typically these functions that have a underscore as a prefix, those are private functions. You can't call those from outside of the instance. So I can't, you know, I can't go ship shields dot underscore process. At least I don't think it will work. But that seems to be the convention that we follow, is that functions that are only meant to be used internally just for this one thing are prefixed with a underscore. And then any functions that you want to have outside functionality, so if you want somebody else to call it, so for example, like my ship has a take damage function that can be called outside of it, that somebody can call when they deal damage to me. So that's one thing. So here we have a function to reset the cooldown. Just as a simple thing, we just set our shield cooldown to be shield cooldown max. We also have this function called flare shield. So whenever we take damage, if our shield absorbs it, we want the shield to like flare up and then like become briefly visible to give visual feedback that it absorbed the hit. So all we're doing is this function is just exactly what we were doing before, setting our shield alpha to be 1, and then with our manage shields function down here, we're always constantly just subtracting it if it's above 0. So it'll flare up and then it'll fade back down if we don't take any damage. So again, this is just moving code that was dealing with shield specifically to a shield specific class. Really kind of decouples things and just makes everything a lot cleaner. So big win there. I'm very happy with that. Same thing with ship thrusters. So if we look at ship thrusters, I just literally cut out the code and just moved it here. And so we are initiating our thrusters, our thruster arrays. I also refactored this to only use 1 loop rather than 5 separate loops. So it's just getting all the thrusters that way. And you know, if it's not able to find a thruster for a certain type, then it won't do anything. So that's all. But yeah, so thrusters, same thing. Ship weapons, a lot of the same stuff. Weapon sound players, the weapons array, the get weapons function, and then I just move the fire weapons function here, and that way I can call this from the ship. I can just say, hey, ship weapons.fire weapons, and then it'll do what I want it to do. So that's pretty sweet. I can also set weapons targets for independent non-fixed weapon targets. So cool stuff there. But yeah, those are the big changes I made to the ships. I also refactored some code. Just, you know, this was my first game I started developing with this engine, so I've accrued a lot of technical debt that I'm having to go through and resolve. Case in point being this save system that I have to implement before I can complete the shipyard feature. So it's part of the game, baby. It's just part of the job. No worries. So what did I do next? Let's go back to my main here. So we refactored ships. I cleaned up function names. Oh yeah, that was another big thing I did is in my method list here, I went through and renamed stuff that to make it, because I was hodgepodge like all over the place. I had some functions that were underscored, some functions that weren't. So now all these functions, like all the AI functions, those are all internal, like private functions. Don't need those. Take damage and add ship to enemies. Those are like public or exported functions, so those need to be usable outside of the scope of just this ship. Other nodes need to be able to call those to affect me, so that works. But yeah, that was a pretty big change. I felt much better about the code after getting that done. And let's see. I also renamed shields to shields HP, which borked a few things, but it was part of the thing I did. I don't know why I made that a specific line item. I don't remember the problem that I had after I renamed it, but I fixed it. So yeah. All right, let's get rid of that stuff. Let's move on. So the big thing is I created a new shipyard window where you can buy new ships. Well, you can browse new ships. You can't buy them yet. Still working on that. And then I'm going to be able to customize your current ship. I got some big plans for that. That's going to be its own devlog when I get that done. But yeah, let's talk about the UI. So first things first, if we go down here to the bottom left, I'm not blocking anything, am I? Okay, cool. So in my UI, I just sort of had all my UI windows thrown in here. So it's a random hodgepodge of it's just a mess. It's just a kitchen sink basically. So I made everything for the shipyard in a shipyard folder, shipyard group here. And what I did was I started with the shipyard window, which is the basic scene here. And this scene is just a control node. It's got a script. It has a color rectangle for the background, and then it starts off with the choose window shown. Now, what this does is, this is getting kind of messy. I'm still working through how I want to organize things, but we're off to a pretty good start. So initially my plan was this is just to have all the sub windows there, and then I can toggle visibility of them. That way I wouldn't have to instance them and like hook up a bunch of signals. But there's some functionality that I needed. I've got some necessary functions inside like the ready function. So this is only called when the node enters the scene tree for the first time. Well, if I already have this stuff here, that's only called once. So instancing and freeing or deleting instances and then, you know, connecting signals was a thing that I had to do to really leverage that, which I'm perfectly fine with. So first things first, let's talk about this shipyard window. So in this code here, the only signal I have working right now that goes back up to the main is shipyard window cancel, and this just tells the main scene to close our window and reopen the location window. So I've got that signal set. I have selected ship data. I don't think I'm even using this anymore. Yeah, I'm not even using this yet. So this is going to be thrown out. And then these are the scenes that I'm going to have to load and instantiate. So I'm basically just loading them as packed scenes. That way I can instance them as needed. And there we go. So bam, boom. So now I have these functions like show browse window, show buy ship window. So these are common code. I was just repeating myself a bunch, so I just combined them all. So what I'm doing here is I'm just instancing the scene. I'm setting the location name variable, which is something that is used. I'm adding it to our scene tree, and then I'm connecting the signals. So this just takes a lot of that code I need to do every time and just simplifies it, so I'm not having to do it a bunch of times. And then now I have a bunch of these signal connector functions. So these two are ones that are automatically generated from connecting the signal in the node editor here. And you can see that by this little green thing here. So on choose window here, maybe I shouldn't have those. Oh, right. Choose window is only ever displayed on the first time you're coming into the shipyard, so that's why I have these here. Otherwise, these would be custom signal connector functions that would be manually connected. But so here we're just deleting ourself, and then we're just showing browse window. I don't have anything for the customize yet, so I'm still working on that. For the other signal connector functions here, so like on browse window cancel. So I can get rid of this print. I no longer need that. That was debugging something. I found out that signals, you have to have unique signal names because, you know, so if I just have a signal called cancel, but I also want to emit another signal called cancel to like main or whatever, it's just a mess. So I had to be explicit when I name my signals. So all we're doing is just emitting a signal, shipyard window cancel. We're just passing that up back to main. So when the browse window, when I click cancel on the browse window, the browse window emits a signal back up to the shipyard window, and then the shipyard window emits a signal back up to the main window, to the main node. So it's kind of messy. Like you're having to just basically go up and down the scene tree. Like you're having to pass in the location name like several times, and then you're having to emit several signals to go back up. But that's a really clean way of doing it because, you know, the only thing my main scene needs to be aware of is the shipyard window. So the shipyard window is managing all these subnodes, and those subnodes only they don't care about anything that is above them. They just emit a signal, and then it's not their problem anymore. So it can be a bit convoluted to do it this way, but I think this is the way that Godot wants you to do it. So this is just signal connectors, just, you know, destroying the browse window, showing the buy ship window, vice versa. And then I'm still trying to figure out how to do purchasing, so that's fine. But yeah, that's the ship window. Now let's look at choose window. So let's just pop open choose window. So this is just a very simple scene here. I just have a center container, which just centers a V-box container that just has a label and 2 buttons that do a thing. So, and this code block here is really simple. We have 2 signals. We have choose browse and choose customize, and we emit those whenever those buttons are clicked. So that's all that is. So let's talk about browse window. So browse window is a bit more involved. So let's take a look at the scene here. So browse window doesn't look like much on the screen here, but the magic happens because of this grid container, which I'll get into in a second. So we just have a margin container just to kind of add some spacing around the edge. We have a vertical box container, a V-box container, and we have the title, we have the label like current ships for sale, we have a horizontal separator, and then we have a scroll container. So this is the first time I was using a scroll container, and if you look like this right here on this little scroll bar here, this is a scroll container. Pretty cool. So good stuff there. Anyway, so that scroll container wraps around this list of ships. Now this grid, if we look over here at the top right, this grid container has 6 columns. And what it does is if we look in the code, I have a grid item scene. So I just have a scene called Shipyard Grid Item. And what I did for this, let's take a look at that. So let's, come on, 2D. There we go. So if we hide this, I have this set as a static size. And what I did to do that is this is a of type panel. I just set the minimum size for the rectangle. I just figured out what works. Now, since how I'm handling multiple resolutions is that it just keeps it at 1920 by 1080, and it just scales it by that aspect ratio. So if you're using like a ultra wide monitor, you're going to have black bars on the sides. It is what it is. I don't know how to handle those multiple resolutions cleanly, especially when it comes to UI. So for this, I just have a static size for this. And yeah, so this just simply has the texture rectangle that has the preview of the ship, an H separator, then it just has a label that has some info about it, the name of the ship, the class of it, and then how much it actually costs in terms of credits. And then if it's a ship that you can't buy, I just have this this color rectangle here, and then a label that just says you can't buy it. So let's take a look at the code. So for this, it emits a signal called clicked. I could probably rename this to be more specific, but for this case, seems to be okay. I might add a to-do here, though. To-do, be more specific with this signal name. There we go. So all we're doing here is we're just loading an image path and whatnot. So this little grid item just basically, all it does is it just takes in some variables, sets the label and the texture rectangle, and that's it. So I also made a utility function to format currency. So I did some work on that. I wasn't sure the best way to do it. I ended up finding through a combination of ChatGPT messing it up and then looking for solutions that people made online, I kind of cobbled something together that sort of works. So what I'm doing is I'm converting this float that we're passing in, I'm converting it to a string, and I make sure I'm stepifying it to only have two decimal places. So if it's something like 69.00000001, I don't want to deal with that. I just want 00 or just nothing. So what it's doing is if there's a decimal place in this float, it's going to split it. And it's going to give us, no matter what, it's going to give us one part. So the integer part, the left side of the decimal, is the first index in this array that's returned from splitting it. We're defaulting the decimal part to be 0, 0 if parts size is greater than 1. So if we actually ended up getting a second part, then we're just going to set decimal part to be whatever that second part was. Now, if we also want to make sure that we have 2 digits for the decimal part. So I'm saying if the length of parts 1 is less than 2, we just add a 0 on the end. So if it's something like 69.2, it should be 69.20 when you're formatting it in terms of currency, money. And then we also have an option here to just output it as an integer, in which case we're just discarding the decimal part entirely. I don't think I'm even using that yet, but I just added it in for funsies. And then from here, now we are formatting the integer portion to have commas. So this integer part here is a byte slice, or it's an array of byte characters. Like, that's what makes strings, basically. It's an array of the actual ASCII characters, or whatever you want to call them. So if you have like a 5-letter word and you break that out, it's going to, if you try to loop through a string, it's going to loop through every letter. So what I'm doing here is I'm looping through every single letter that is returned for that. So 4-digit in integer part, or every number rather, we are adding the digits up as we go, as we build the formatted string. So I'm just adding that digit to the integer string. So again, since these are all strings, I'm just appending this digit string value to the inner string. So I'm building this integer string as we go. So I'm looping through every number in the integer part, and I'm just adding that to the string. Next, we're going to figure out where we are in the string. So say if we have a number that's like 4,000, I'll just do 1,234. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So that first digit is what we're going to start with. So 1. So we're going to add that to our string. So this string is going to be 1, right? It's going to go through, it's going to do a counter, and it's going to figure out where we are in the string. So we're taking the length of the integer part, subtracting it by this index, which we have here. So we start that at 0. We don't want to add a comma at the end, but every 3 digits. So if the counter is greater than 2, and our counter, we use modulus here, so divisible by is basically like 3. So if we do that 3 and it equals 1, that means that we need to put a comma there. So then we're adding that comma to the integer string, and then we're incrementing our index, and then so we're just constantly looping through every one. And what this does is that this builds the string. So it starts out with 1, realizes that, oh, we should have a comma, and then adds 2, 3, 4, and then so that's what it does. I explained that really poorly, and I apologize, but it's almost midnight, so leave me alone. But there we go. So we've got that. So that's what Shipyard Grid Item does. It formats the stuff needed to be displayed on there. So let's go back to the browse window. So in our ready, which is called when the node scene enters the scene tree for the first time, or when this node enters the scene tree for the first time, what we're doing is we're going to populate a list of ships that we can sell. So for my ships auto load, I made a function called get sellable ships by faction. So let's take a look at what that does. So again, this auto load just has the master dictionary list of all of our ships with some of the basic information about them, such as the description, which I'm not even using now that I think about it. I need to put that somewhere. And the scene path, so I can instance it to pull the data from all of my ship scenes. as also what factions it belongs to, the ship class, and also how much it costs. So I'm storing all that data here in this auto load. And then so this get sellable ships by faction takes in a faction, and it just basically goes through every single ship in our list, and it's just making sure that is this even meant to be sold. If we have a base price less than a 0, it means it's not for sale. So for example, I don't want you to be able to buy a drone fighter. It's a drone. There's no room for humans in there. There's no cargo space. If you buy that, you're going to have a bad time. It's not meant for players. So if there's certain drone ships that shouldn't be sold as a ship that you can pilot, I just set the base price to be less than a 0. That may need to be reevaluated later on, but for now, it's what I have. We're also making sure that is the ship authorized for the independent faction. If it is, then we're just going to add it to our list, and we're just going to skip to the next iteration, which is going to go through and check all these criteria again. Now, if it's not authorized for the independent faction, is it authorized for the faction that we specified? If it is, then add it to the list. Once we've iterated through everything, we're going to output the eligible ships that we can sell. So we're just getting our list of ships, and then we're just iterating through that list. We're instancing our grid item scene, which is a type panel, of course. I have a to-do here to improve this somehow. So since our ship has since our ship scenes have a lot of the data that we need. So if I go over here to like Synthocracy Luxury Shuttle here, like all these script variables here, acceleration speed, strafe speed, turn speed, max speed, boost duration, hit points, shields, attack range, cargo space, like all this stuff is on the ship scene. I'm not storing it on my ship's auto load. That would bloat that dictionary a lot. I'm already using this stuff here. I've already got it. So my method for how I'm doing this is I'm instancing that ship. So what I'm doing is that since this list of ships gives me a scene path, I'm instancing that I'm loading it, and then I'm instancing it. And that gives me access to all the stuff. So I can say, like for this image path here, when I'm setting up my shipyard grid item, I can get the node. I can use the get node method off of ship instance to get its sprite node, and I can reference its texture and resource path so that my little grid item can load that same image. I can also set it to be the name of the ship, the base price of the ship, and so I had to do that in order to even get the path without having to just store a bunch of duplicate data in my ship's auto load, which also wasn't a good solution. So this is the best way I've got it working now. For now, since I don't have a way to store player data, including what faction the player belongs to, we're just checking if it's independent right now. I have a to-do to think about how best to determine this, so I've got something in there, but this will determine whether or not you're authorized to buy a ship. And then from there, once we're done with the ship instance, I just destroy it. I think Godot's garbage collector cleans it up automatically if it hasn't been added to the scene tree, which I'm not adding it to the scene tree. I'm just instancing it so I can access its properties. So once I've cleaned up, I'm adding our grid item to our list of ships here, and then I'm also connecting the signal that we clicked it. Now, if we do click it, we're passing in the ship name, and then I'm emitting that signal, browse window, view ship, and I'm just passing in that ship name. So that sends it back up to our shipyard window. So once it gets that, it's going to take in the ship name. It's going to instance the buy ship window scene. I think I connected it to on view ship. So I'm taking in the ship name, destroying the browse window, and then showing the ship window with that ship name. So let's take a look at the buy ship window. So this window here is a little bit more involved. So I just have a margin container just to add some like padding around the edges. You can see over here I've got these margin 25 pixel constants here. Again, all that's going to be handled by themes when I eventually tackle that, hopefully. But for now, I'm just doing it manually. I have an HBox container just to have left and right sides. On the left side, I have a center container that has a texture rectangle that has the image. Now, what I'm thinking of doing here is I'm thinking about doing something pretty snazzy. I think in the center container, I might set up a viewport. I might just get rid of this center container actually and just make it a viewport. And inside that viewport, I'm going to instance the actual ship, add it to that viewport as a child, and then sort of that way it can actually fly through space. And in that viewport, I'm also going to add like the parallax background, so you can get a little preview of like the ship flying through space. I think that'd be pretty snazzy. Plus, this ship image preview doesn't show the weapons on the ship, so you have no idea like what it has on there. So this would also give you a visual representation of where all the weapons are. So, and plus, since I'm already instancing the ship, I can access all of its data to populate all this stuff on the right side. So that's my game plan there. I think that should work. I just haven't done it yet. I'm gonna mess with that later. I just wanted to get something working, just a proof of concept, like, yes, this is the ship you're going to buy, right? So then on the right side of the HBox container, I have a VBox container, which contains a panel. And inside that panel, we have a scroll container, and I manually set the position and the size here because the panel is not a container. So the scroll container was just kind of like doing whatever it wanted to. So I set like I just set manual boundaries for it. So now if this VBox container here, if I have a ton of data that's being added to it, I can now just scroll through it cleanly. And then finally, I have this HBox container down here that has the buttons to cancel or purchase. Now, in this VBox container up here, I have a label that just shows that it just has the ship details, a horizontal separator, and then I have a rich text label. And this is something that I started playing around with. So if you look over here, I think you can see it. There's this BB code text here, and you can see I'm messing around with this stuff called BB code. If we bring that up here, you can see it's a bunch of rules for, you know, working with code. So the reason why I'm doing this is because previously when I was doing UI, I would have, you know, however many labels I would need. So I would have a label that would actually label what the field is, and then I would have a label component for the actual value of whatever it was. And I did it that way so that I can apply individual styles to those labels. So if I wanted it a different color, I had to make my own separate label for it. Well, with BB code, you can do all that with just this fancy code here. So I can specify color down here. I can just say color equals whatever color I want it to be. Just wrap it in these tags. So if you're using a rich text label, I felt it would be much easier to go through and just build this big, long, formatted string that has all the stuff I wanted, rather than managing like 20 different nodes and just constantly updating the text values of those. So this is the approach I took. I think it's working pretty well. You can see here I just added some basic test data, nothing much. But if we look at the buy ship window code here, we've got two signals. We've got buy ship window cancel and buy ship window purchase. I'm still figuring out the purchase, of course. And then we're getting the nodes that we need to manage. We only have to manage 2 nodes. Woohoo! And then of course we're taking in the ship string. That way this is expected to be set by the calling instance before adding us to the scene tree. So what this means is that ready is called when this node enters the scene tree for the first time. So we want this to be set by whoever is instancing us before they add us to the scene tree. In this case, this will be done by Shipyard Window. So we're getting the ship name added. So what we're doing here is we're instancing the ship, and this is like a sort of a complex one-liner here, but we are accessing our ship's auto load. We're accessing the list of ships. We're getting our ship by the ship name, and then we're referencing the scene path of it. So it gets that scene path, it loads it, and then from there we are instancing it, just all in one line. So now that we have ship instance, now we can go through and start building our BB code string. So I just declare a string. You can see I'm setting the table to have 2 columns. And then what I'm doing is for every field, I'm adding cells. So I made these handy functions down here, these BB code formatter functions, where when I add a cell, I just pass in the value of what I want to add in, and it wraps it in these cell tags for me. Same thing with color, even though I'm not using that yet. So I've got those formatter functions here that kind of make this a little cleaner. So you can see here I'm adding ship class, and then I'm adding I should be using a color tag here, but I'm not. Whatever. Well, I am using the color tag. I'm just not using my color function I made. So whatever. So you can see here I'm just basically building these strings. So every time I add something, I'm taking BB code, I'm doing plus equals to it, which is appending more strings onto this string. So I'm just basically building this big string. I'm accessing the ship instance data, such as like turn speed, max speed, acceleration speed, hit point shields, all that stuff, right? And yeah, so this gets all the information and just basically formats it. It just formats one string, and then once I've got it all set, I add the table closing tag, and then I set my ship info BB code text property to equal my BB code I just set. I just set the texture for my ship image. I clean up the ship instance now that I don't need it anymore, and that's it. We're good to go. So it's a lot of lines of code, but it's idiomatic, and like it makes sense what you're trying to do. So I'm just basically step by step building this big formatted string, and it looks nice. So if I run the game again, land, go to Shipyard, browse a ship, check out a ship. This is basically a table, but it's all just one string, but it's formatted for me. And you can see I've got a lot of power here to do BB code stuff, so I can change colors. Since it's in a table, it's already kind of formatted for me in a nice readable manner. And since I have it in a scroll container, if I click on one of the ships, like that big Synthocracy flagship that's got like 15 weapon slots, I can scroll down and see more stuff. If it has carriers, carried fighters, I can see that stuff. So yeah, so this is a start, and I like this approach. I think it works for what I need to do. And once I'm able to get the save system working to where I can reliably access player data that persists when the player is not even present, because right now the player gets deleted as soon as you land at a location, and then whenever you leave a location, it's just instancing a ship scene and setting it as the player, but it doesn't have any like persistent data. The way that I did persistent data was kind of just rigged, like tracking what you have in your inventory and stuff. So this, once I get that save file working, I'll have real persistent player data. So that means that I don't have to start over every time I want to play my game. I can keep a save file, which is cool. And I can also access that save file to pull values of what my current ship has, so that way I can add those little parentheses that kind of show you the difference compared to your current ship. So that way you can make a more educated decision on whether this is going to be a good ship for you before you blow a bunch of money on it. But that's what I got so far. You can see the scroll bar working here just fine. Works super cool. I like it. Pretty snazzy. Again, like the more I learn about Godot, the more I love it. It's like Legos with code, man. It's so cool. Especially when you're doing UI, because you're basically literally snapping in Legos together to do what you want. Really awesome. So, anyway, I think that's what I've got. Let me just double check and make sure I don't have anything else. So that's all I've got so far. I wanted to stop there because, I mean, I've already been recording for over an hour. So, probably a good thing I stopped there. Otherwise, it was going to be like a 5-hour devlog. If I were to get everything done, like, you know, the save system, getting that cool preview thing working, and then also doing the ship customization, that would be a huge devlog. So I'm going to break those out into their own things. But yeah. Anyway, the game's coming along. It's a bit slower than I would like, but right now, I'm basically having to learn a lot of new stuff right now. So my brain's already kind of overloaded, learning a few other different languages right now. And so when I come back to Godot, it's starting to feel more familiar and more at home to me, but it still takes quite a bit of that mental brain juice to get stuff done. So I'm progressing a lot slower than I would have liked, but I think my circumstances should change here soon to where I'll be able to start dedicating a lot more time to this, a lot more time to making YouTube content in general. So I'll be happy about that. And plus, there's a lot of cool games coming out soon that I want to play too. Like, I want to play some Baldur's Gate 3, man, but I ain't got the time for that right now. So, anyway, thank you so much for watching. Listen to me ramble. I'll see you in whatever video I make next, I guess. Peace.